you're just going to be heightened. Like if you're a jerk when you're poor, you're going to be a heightened jerk when you're rich. It's like,
true.
So
and entitled. I believe that everyone has a purpose.
Yeah.
And that our underlying purpose is to bring positive impact to our community.
And I think when I was younger, I remember really being tortured with this thought of like, what's God's will for my life? I was like, really like what's his will? Like, how do I find out what his will is?
If I give 3% of my top line revenue.
Okay, top line,
regardless of profitability.
Welcome to The Friday Habit with Mark Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learned to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another Friday Habit. And today we're joined in person again, which is some of my favorite types of interviews. We're joined by Chris Tyrell, and he's the owner and operator of Chris's Garage Doors, a Colorado-based company built on integrity, transparency, and world-class customer service. Chris took a trade skill and turned it into a thriving business, proving that you can build something remarkable by treating people right and showing up consistently. Chris, welcome to the Friday Habit.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love being here.
So you and I met very briefly at this chamber event.
Yes.
And you had won, was it Small Business of the Year award? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And so, you went up there, accepted your award, and I was like, oh, this would be a great person to have. One of the things I love that you did is you got up there, you grabbed the mic, and then you said, like, this is all like glory to God, and
Sure.
I'm thankful for Jesus. And I was like, oh wow, this guy's bold about his faith, which I think is very cool too, especially in this day and age, where we have so many opportunities to share our faith, and especially as business leaders, we have so much influence, in different spheres and things like that. So I was like, man, I need to get you on the show so we can talk and hear about your journey, hear about your business, Garage Doors.
Very interesting.
So that's very interesting. But you got a great brand, your website, everything you do, I feel like is very top notch.
Thank you.
And I think that obviously is something that really draws probably the average consumer your way, because when you really kind of do some research out there, a lot of it's websites that haven't been updated since like the early 2000s, and like really poor branding, and it's like some fat guy smoking a cigarette coming out there to like, work on your stuff. Unreliable, especially in that industry. I feel like there's a lot of contractors and stuff that are fly by night,
Sure.
And
or we like to stay tuck in his truck.
Yeah, exactly. So I would love to kind of hear a little bit about your journey of what got you into the whole garage door business, because I doubt someone thinks to themselves like, hey, I'm going to go to college and learn how to install garage doors.
You mean you've never dreamed of being a garage door person? Come on.
I guess my thought too is like, okay, you never really think about the garage door, because I feel it's like one of those things. In my lifetime, I've had 3 garage doors.
Sure.
And only in my most recent home, I had to actually like replace the garage like door opener and the track and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now I'm pretty handy, so I did that myself.
Congratulations. Maybe you should call me to inspect it.
Yeah, I know, exactly. It's going to fall down and it's going to be a mess. But it's one of those things where I feel like they're an appliance that kind of constantly works for the most part, know, and you don't need to replace them but every like 10 or 15 years or, whatever. But anyways, let's hear about your journey, how you got into the business. And is it something that you've always wanted to be an entrepreneur or like own your own business?
Actually, no. To answer that question, I never wanted to start my own company.
Okay.
I consider myself a reluctant entrepreneur.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I actually went to seminary. So a very clear path from seminary to starting a garage door company, right?
Yeah.
It's obvious. I don't know why it's confusing to you. Basically, when I was in seminary, I ended up working for a guy that did garage doors.
Okay.
He went to my church. Actually, I don't know if you know him. His name's Nathan Woodard. He also went to Denver United.
It sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah.
If I saw him, I'd be like, oh, Nate.
You might know him, yeah. So I was kind of in a transition with my other job. I was full-time seminary, full-time working another job, and contract shifted, and my team got switched from underneath me, and I just was looking for something else and went to a birthday party, heard this guy talking about how he lost his only employee because he couldn't guarantee him full-time hours. I was getting a little tired of working full-time and school full-time, so I just walked up to him and said, I'll work for you part-time if you train me. And we met a couple times. He hired me. I started working with him, trained me in the industry. He was an interesting guy. So I started in January, and about May, he told me, he's like, hey, Chris, my wife and I are going to go to Africa for 6 weeks. And it was just me and him. And he's like,
good luck holding down the fort.
Yeah, exactly. He was
got
like,
any questions?
He was like, here, you
don't
get two
text
choices.
me.
He's like, I'll close the company down and just pick it up when I get back. Or you can run it for me over the summer. And I'm like, well, I don't have any classes, so let's just see what happens.
Okay.
Bit of a crash course. I had
Yeah.
to learn how to schedule and invoice and communicate with customers a little bit more directly. And it was a tough time, but I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And then eventually I ended up working part-time for a church, part-time for him, and finishing up my last semester of seminary. And literally the month that I graduated, he told me he was selling the company and moving to California.
Oh, wow.
And we kind of parted ways, and he went his way, I went mine. I just kept working for the church. I didn't want to work for a different company.
And it never crossed your mind to buy the company, or did he offer it to you?
didn't
Like,
want
hey,
his
do
company.
you want? Yeah. You're like, hey, man.
I just finished seminary. I'm not thinking about doing garage doors.
Exactly. That's true. Yeah.
I was just looking for my next step. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well,
Okay.
I've got a part-time job. I've got the degree. Now let's see where we go next. And I did not have any desire to own a company or even really keep doing garage doors.
Yeah.
But like a month later, maybe 2, a friend of mine who owned a roofing company called me, and he's like, hey, we're doing a bid in Steamboat Springs. It's for an apartment complex, and they want to replace all their garage doors. Do you want to bid it? And I said yes. So it was 41 doors.
Wow.
I submitted the bid. They accepted it. I incorporated, and thus started the journey of Chris's Garage Doors.
So it was like that one big opportunity that kind of like fell in your lap.
Yep.
And so then it was like, it's like, all right, well, I guess I'll fake it till I make it, like get this thing going. And
in a way, yeah.
Is that where the name came from? Just
Yes,
like it was
I
like a
put
last
zero
minute,
thought
like
into
crap.
the name.
What do
Yeah.
we do? It's like, let's call it Chris's Garage Doors.
Well, at that point, it was just a payday. I wasn't even necessarily looking to grow a company. I was like,
Right.
all right, well, let's just have something for the IRS to look at. And that was it. Chris's Garage Doors. No thought put into the name whatsoever.
Okay. And so you're like, okay, I'll do this project and then I'll get back to ministry.
It was more of like, it was like, do I want to just have this on the side so I can help friends out if they need help?
Yeah.
Or do I want to build something that can be like a part-time career since I only had a part-time job?
Yeah.
Or do I want to scale this and see what I can do?
Yeah.
And I didn't really come up with an answer. And I started networking and building. And by a year from when I incorporated, I left my job at the church and just went full-time garage doors.
Wow. So then it was one of those things where it was kind of like the opportunity arose and then you kind of started going down that path. And then once you started going down that path, it just started to kind of snowball on top of itself. And I think it's a common story for a lot of us, right? I mean, I picked up a camera and just started taking photos of my kids and, started doing video stuff. And then it was like, hey, you do photography and video?
Yeah.
Can you do this? And then it's like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll just, keep going down that path. And then, it was a great side hustle for several years until it became a full-time, hustle. So,
and you learn as you go.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is, because you start reading books, right? I think when you're starting a business from scratch, and you don't have the desire to, you just have no like wherewithal of what it takes to run a business. And so I started reading books. I got recommended the E-Myth pretty early on.
Oh, that's a great book.
It is a great book.
Yeah.
And it showed me that I actually have an advantage that a lot of people don't, because the whole thing about the E-Myth is like, a lot of people they're a good technician and they want to be their own boss. Yeah. And I never wanted to stay in the field. So like from when I started, my goal was to get someone into the field so that I could do more back end of business development. And I was able to do that within a couple of years. And
nice.
I don't really do a lot of field work anymore, even though I can.
Right.
But yeah, it's just, it's just what God puts in front of you. And you got to just honor the opportunity that's given. And it may look completely different from what you're expecting, but it doesn't mean it's wrong or a bad choice.
Right. Yeah, I always say, like it says in Psalms, like a man plans his way in his heart, but the Lord guides his steps,
Yeah.
And I think when I was younger, I remember really being tortured with this thought of like, what's God's will for my life? I was like, really like what's his will? Like, how do I find out what his will is? And then, as I've gotten older, I think there's an element, especially having kids, myself, there's an element of like, my will for my kids is really that they're happy, that they do something that they love, and that, they have a good life, right? And so I think there's an element that I think about is like God is like this good heavenly Father where he's like, hey man, like just do something that honors me and that that you love doing, and I'll bless it. It's not like I have this and then again, right? He'll guide you. He'll open and close doors, and you'll kind of walk through the labyrinth of life and figure out where the end is and stuff like that. But I think there is an element of a lot of people being tortured about like what's the perfect thing, and I'm always like kind of like I don't know if there is a perfect thing.
When God wants to bless you, He's a good God. He wants to bless you, and He's going to give you those opportunities. And it doesn't necessarily look like what we expect blessing to look like,
right?
But that's fun. The Great Commission, big movement about missions off of that. But the actual Greek translation of the first word, we say go. Therefore, right? It's actually in your going. So it's more of like an active, like as you go.
Interesting.
Basically preach the gospel.
That's
so it's
great.
Like,
See, look at that. Just one little word here. It changes. I remember as a kid being devastated.
I gotta go.
I don't want to go to Africa, but I know he's going to send me. I'm going to be miserable.
Which he might. You
might.
Can get that kind of call.
That's right. Totally.
But it's more like as we go in our life, whether it's to the grocery store or to Africa, we are representatives of God's kingdom, and we're called to make disciples.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I'm sure having that time in seminary has given you a lot of things for your tool belt to make. Because I know when we talked, we got coffee, a few weeks ago, and I know one of the things that you were talking about in that conversation, you were saying how you always wanted to kind of minister to people like. You wanted to join the military as a chaplain so that you could kind of like, minister to these people, in the situation that they're in, and it's almost like now you have a business and you can kind of minister to customers and employees and all these other kind of things. You're like the chaplain of the business world.
It's true. I've really started to feel like that because I never fully understood why I felt God directed me away from that program, because I thought there was such a unique ministry opportunity, and it's more just to be there for people that needed someone in a place that they would have no one else to go to. And in a way, in the business community, I have the opportunity to talk to people from all walks of life, all faith belief systems, and to just be a light and hopefully a positive representation of Jesus in their life, and just in a place where people can come and talk. And you mentioned that you said I was bold about my faith, and I've never really felt that I'm bold because I'm just talking about who I am, right? It doesn't feel, and I guess maybe in our culture there's a lot of like fear around expressing your religious beliefs or view systems, but I try to phrase it in a way that's inviting. Like, I don't know if I said this at that particular event, but I'll often say something like, hey, I believe I'm a follower of Jesus, and he's important to who I am, and I wouldn't have the success I've had without him in my life, and I love to talk about him. And then I'll often add a joke like, hey, I'd love to talk to you even if you think I'm stupid. Just, I'm never going to force you to believe the way I do, but I love to just have a conversation and just try to make it inviting. And it doesn't feel bold to me. It just feels like, hey, this is a window for opportunity to just talk about my faith. And there's a lot of people going through a lot of stuff, and maybe they just need someone to talk to about faith and what Jesus has done for my life and how he's taught me and guided me and even laid this opportunity in front of me. So I feel like this is just a platform to talk to people about my faith and to live out my faith. I believe about giving to the community and making our society better and impacting our sphere of influence. Yeah. And so, in a way, I am a business world chaplain somehow.
Yeah. Well, and I think what a better platform than being a successful business leader, in order to be that positive influence and lead by example, and it's like in some ways you can make almost a bigger impact in the world via your finances and employment, all these other kind of things than you could if you were a pastor or
Right.
I'm not saying that there's not a place for that, but what I'm saying is that a lot of people think like, oh, well, I'm not a pastor, or I'm not a missionary, and so, you know, I'm useless, but it's like, no, like,
right.
Where you're going, you can even make more of an impact,
Yeah. A pastor is a calling. It's not a higher calling.
Yeah.
And we're all called to represent God in our lives. And I view pastors as more of a discipleship or formational role, where you're talking to people who have faith. Generally speaking, most pastors aren't seeing a lot of people who don't believe, at least to a degree, in God. Whereas we're more called to just be witnesses to the gospel in the workplace. Yeah. Right. That's the same. It's another calling. It's no higher or lower. Right. It's just we're called to follow Jesus wherever He leads us. Yeah. And I've often said I've had more opportunity to talk to people about Jesus outside of the church than I ever did when I worked inside the church.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. So garage doors aren't sexy.
They can be.
I've seen some mid-century modern doors that look kind of sweet. So are you doing the door and the motor and all that stuff, or are you just doing the motor and...
We do it all. Okay. Anything residential. So from routine maintenance. So you mentioned that you leave it and forget it for 10 years. It is recommended you get it tuned up once a year.
WD-40 and a little wrench. Okay.
Not WD-40. Fun fact. Well, okay, WD-40 has different iterations, but the original WD-40 is its solvent. I think the WD stands for water dissolution or something like that. Okay. So it actually cleans, but it doesn't lubricate. So you want lubricant. Right. On especially metal components. Right. So you can use WD-40 to clean it out, and then you want to use the lubricant side.
Look at this. We're learning something every day.
They do sell lubricant too. So it's just depends what you buy.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So all right, so you start this business out of like this opportunity that comes your way, big project. I mean, that seems like
it's huge.
Like, oh wow, like this is going to be. What's the profit margin in the garage world? Is it you have materials, right? Obviously, so it's like you have your gross profit is always like, oh, that's a big number, and then it's like after you pay people, buy materials, do all this stuff, is it like a 20%?
So
like 10%,
like gross profit into the year. It depends on. A lot of things. I've ranged anywhere from, there's 1 year I went negative, just one.
Yeah, okay.
So far. Yeah. But outside of the negative, anywhere from 5 to 20%, depending on.
Yeah, just how good the year is, what kind of business is coming in.
There's so many factors, and it's just part of running a small business. I think once you get to a certain point where you got a little bit more efficiencies and stuff, but I mean, last year alone, I had like a ton of money put into my vehicles because I had three transmissions go bad.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And then some other issues, and it was just like... that ate into my profit quite a bit.
Well, and then I know for me, like earlier on, I was always putting the money back into the business because I didn't need, I had my full-time job. Yeah. And so then I was like, all right, well, let me buy the best camera gear and the best things that would help me do my job better. Yeah. And I still try to do that, to kind of keep things always fresh and having the latest tech and things like that here at the studio. And just so that we're kind of being practicing the things that we're preaching to people, where it's like, hey, and then also being thought leaders in a space. It's like, okay, I need to know about this newest, tech stuff and whatever, but I need to use it in order to really be able to talk fluently about it. And so putting money back into the business, I think is always, especially when you're starting out, it's hard, but in the same way, I think in the long run, it really helps you, just grow, efficiently,
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime you're able to invest back into the company, it's helpful. Yeah. But the other thing that takes away from my profit margin is my giving commitment.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that.
So it all stemmed from, it ultimately stems from my faith background. I believe in sacrificial giving. I believe that God has called us to give to Him, to the community, to make the world better. So as I started to build this company, I realized that I got something that could be special. And so I created the vision of making Colorado a better place to live. So I give 3% of my top line revenue.
Okay, top line,
regardless of profitability. Okay. And I give it to local nonprofits. And we have parameters. They're not super strict, but it's really like you have to be focused on humans. So food insecurity
in Colorado,
mental health. Yes, in Colorado, preferably in the Denver metro, but Colorado as a whole. So food insecurity, mental health, accessibility for housing. Like one of my favorites is the Home Builders Foundation. They build like ramps and they modify homes for people with physical limitations. And I work with the Backpack Society, who they help give meals to kids who are on the food plans, so they have food over the weekends, and then they have markets for families. Just stuff that makes the community better. We don't really support animal charities and stuff. Not that we don't like animals. Both of my dogs are rescues. It's just that there's a limited amount of resources we can give, and I'm focusing on
humans.
Yeah. But that top line commitment, it's very tough.
Yeah. How are you giving as far as at the end of the year, or are you doing it every quarter, or like?
Yeah, that was kind of a journey, and I'm still trying to figure out the best way to do it. I started by doing every quarter, and I didn't like it because I had to wait till my bookkeeper got me my numbers before I could actually donate. So what we're doing now is we take the previous year's revenue, and then just take that number and give it out to charities throughout the year. Different things. Excuse me. One of the cool ones is there's one called The Tank, put on through the South Metro Denver Chamber, and it's like it's modeled after a famous TV show. But
the Shark Tank, right?
Yeah, I don't think I'm allowed to say it.
So
I
really?
You said
Okay.
it. You said it, not me. So we take, instead of like investors looking to put into business, we take business owners who are donors, and they're going to put them into charity.
Okay, yeah.
And so it's cool. It's coming up on, I don't know when this podcast is going to air, but it's coming up on May 7th.
Yeah, this won't be out by then.
Okay,
but
strike that from the record. Next year.
Yeah, next year. Exactly. Okay, so then you have that 3% on your top line, and then do you do more on the bottom line, or then it's just that was your commitment?
We don't do any more financial.
Yeah.
But we do. I organize 3 to 4 team volunteer events every year during business hours, and I bonus my team. I give them their hourly rate in a bonus for the time. So we shut down the company for a day or half a day, and we go volunteer. And then I also bonus my employees up to 8 hours of bonus pay, hourly pay, for each month if they want to volunteer on their own time.
Okay.
So if they pick a Saturday and they want to go do something, or 2 hours every Saturday, they can get just a little extra bump in their pay. I did organize a fundraiser last year that helped support a local charity. We threw a party for myself and raised money for charity. It was a fun event. And then I serve on a couple boards. I'm on the board of the Symphony of the Rockies.
Okay.
And I'm the chair of the Partners in Philanthropy group through the South Metro Chamber. So we're just really actively involved. And then of course I give out of my personal budget. I give to my church and other ministries that are separate from what my company does.
Yeah.
And I volunteer with my church as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then as far as the decision for the top line, because you hear like, do you do your gross or your net, where do you give that percentage? Yeah. What was the decision or reasoning behind doing it?
3% just seemed like a number that made sense. Because the debate is like, okay, well, if you want to go with the 10% tithe, like, is that off of first fruits, so top line, or is it off of what you're taking home because you have to pay all the taxes and stuff like that? I don't think that there's a hard line on what or how you're supposed to give. But I felt like 3% kind of trickled down to close to 10% net anyway.
Right.
Because, and it varies obviously on how well everything else goes. I just felt like, to me, giving has to be a priority. And you need to make a commitment that works. Yeah. That you can commit to.
Right. It's like going to the gym.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go 3 times a day, 7 days a week. And then you're like, I missed, and now I don't want
Right. And you can increase as it goes, right? Yeah. Start with 10 minutes and then go, right? Just go for a walk. Like, even just going for a walk.
Right. Yeah.
So there's something that said that going for a walk a day will actually extend your life like 10 years. So to me, it's because I've had business owners that are struggling financially or that are not making a lot of money say, I just not in a place where I can give. And I'm like, well, from a biblical perspective, I look at the woman, the widow, who gave her 2 pennies. Yeah. And Jesus said that she gave more than anybody because she gave of everything she had. And so I'm like, if you are willing to commit to giving when you don't have much, and that's why a percentage is actually, it works, because your giving capacity will grow as you grow. Yeah. But if you don't make a commitment to giving early on, generally speaking, when you're big and you have money, there's always something to spend money on. There's always this expense you weren't expecting. There's always an emergency that happens, or just anything. Life gets in your way every step of the way. Like there is not a person in the world that isn't interfered with financial problems, or even the wealthiest in the world. Obviously, they got enough money to spend.
Right.
But they're going to have hits that are going to affect their ability to give in that sense. And so when you're a billionaire and you're committing $1 million, it doesn't really feel like a sacrifice, right? If you're a billionaire giving 3%, like if I make $1 billion, I'm still going to commit to that 3%.
Yeah.
And I don't actually know the number right now, but math. So it's just like, to me, even if you're just like, hey, I'm going to find something in my life right now that I don't need to spend money on, whether it's a cup of coffee, and I'm just going to take that coffee, that money I would spend on coffee, and give it to a local charity. Even if it's $5, charities, they will take $5, right?
Yeah.
It's helpful in one way. One thing I did when I was younger, I don't do it anymore, maybe I should think about it, is every time I went to spend money on myself that was unnecessary, I committed to spending that exact same amount of money on someone else. So like if I was like, I just, I've got food at home, but I really want to go get a hamburger, I would either take a friend with me and buy their dinner, or take that money and give it to like the church or something like that. Just because it was, one, to help me think about how I'm spending my money. Yeah. And two, just to be like, well, if I've got money to spend on myself, I should have money to spend on others. In that sense. It's like if it's necessary, there's necessary expenses. But we all spend, pretty much every person in America that's not on a strict budget can spend frivolously. Right. And we have, even if you're on a budget, sometimes you go outside of it. So it's like, thinking about making that commitment to giving no matter what, it's really important to me, and it's kind of a principle of my company. That year that I told you I was negative in profit, I still gave what my commitment was, and that hurts. Like it was so tough that year because I didn't have any money to give. I just gave it anyway.
Yeah, and it's kind of goes to that saying of, who you are when you're broke is who you are when you're going to be rich too. A lot of people say, oh, well, once I start making money, once I start doing, then it's like, you're just going to be heightened. Like if you're a jerk when you're poor, you're going to be a heightened jerk when you're rich. It's like,
it's true.
So
an entitled jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so really it's like, and the way that I kind of look at it throughout, my journey in my life and stuff, is that whole idea of like, who do I need to become in order to receive the blessing? Like I never think that like God's withholding blessing or, whatever, but it's almost like he's like, hey man, once you reach this level, this gate will open, but you need to become this kind of person so that when this gate opens, it doesn't destroy you, And so I've kind of had that thought of like, okay, like who do I need to become to be a good steward of these things,
Absolutely.
And that kind of stuff, I've seen in my own life where it's like, oh wow, it's like you kind of reach the next level. It's like, oh cool, So
well, he's a good father. That's the point. Like how many spoiled rich kids do you see because their parents didn't withhold blessing from them? Sometimes you have to withhold things from your children for them to develop character. And that's what God's doing with us half the time. Or maybe all the time. Like there are kids that are well adjusted and well developed and very responsible because their parents taught him that money just doesn't come, or whatever doesn't come. Like it's something that they're intentional about. But there's a lot of people out there that everything's been handed to them whenever they've asked, and they don't necessarily become the people that you want to be around, right? And if God just gave us everything we asked for all the time, it wouldn't be in our own best interest. And God sees that, and that's totally.
Yeah, we try to teach our kids give, save, spend. Like in that order.
I love
it's
it.
Like teaching those kind of principles earlier on. So.
Just take from the top. Here's what you're given. Right? I love it.
Yeah. What? How long has the business been around now?
Going on 8 years. It'll be 8 years in August of 2025.
Awesome. So in the earlier years, you started the business. You're like, we'll just use Chris's garage doors for the IRS because I'm going to do this project. And then stuff started, happening. For that first project you got, it was 40 some doors. Did you go and do the whole thing yourself?
I did.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So that was a lot of work.
It was. And it was long days because I had a very tight window. It was they were non-insulated single car bays, so it wasn't like massive doors. But I had 2 weeks to do it. So I was doing 4 or 5 doors a day. Wow. And it was at the end of September in Steamboat, which meant winter was coming, and it was coming fast. So I I actually had perfect weather the whole time.
Oh, wow.
And then the day we left, which was Saturday, it started coming down. And if we
Really?
didn't leave that day, we would have been stuck.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So worked out well. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then you finished that project, and then somebody else is like, "Hey,
I didn't actually get a lot of work that year.
Okay.
I had a friend that had me change a spring because it broke, and I think I maybe had 1 or 2 other jobs from October to December.
Yeah.
And then I was introduced to networking. I had a conversation with my insurance guy and asked him how he grew his business. He recommended a chamber. First thing I did was join the South Metro Denver Chamber in January 2018.
Okay.
And then I got introduced to realtor associations, BNI. I started just getting out there and meeting people in the business community. And I had an advantage in the sense that not a lot of garage door companies network. So if you're a garage door person listening to this podcast, I just let you in on one of my trade secrets.
Yeah.
It's not a secret because there's other companies that do it. But I started building relationships, and it started growing faster than I ever expected I could have grown a company. Because again, I was working for a guy that at the time didn't have great business sense. He had been doing it for 7 years, and I was his only employee.
Right.
And then we hired another part-time guy. And so I didn't learn how to grow a business from him. I kind of learned how to operate.
Yeah, it was kind of like a lifestyle business for him, where it's like, I make enough money to pay my rent or my bills.
He was that technician.
You know,
He didn't want to work for someone else. And it was because of his strong sense of ethics, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
And now he actually started a garage door company in California, and he's crushing it. He's actually surpassed me in revenue already, and he's growing, and I love it. So he took the lessons of starting a company and revamped how to do business, and it's been cool to watch him.
That's cool. And so do you stay in contact with him, and
all the time?
You guys talk garage doors?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
We talk shop. We talk family. Actually, shout out, his wife wrote a great book called Redeeming Food.
Oh.
If you struggle with food and you want to kind of have a spiritual perspective on it, it's an incredible book. It kind of changed my perspective on how I eat and how I enjoy food.
Interesting.
It's really cool. So Laura Woodard, Redeeming Food.
Okay.
I don't know if you need to cut that out, but that's a shout out.
No, we'll put it in the description in the show notes.
So his wife's family, his in-laws still live here, so he'll come back a lot of holidays. So he'll text me when he's in town. We'll meet. We'll talk business, life.
Yeah.
Faith, stuff like that. And then there's a garage door conference that happens every other year in Vegas. And so we'll normally get together at that conference.
See each other there.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then I'll call him if I have like technical questions, or if just get advice on how he's doing things differently than I am. And it's fun.
That's cool. That's always nice to have kind of a relationship in the business. You know, Ben on the show here is he's that guy for me.
Awesome.
So we've been friends for over a decade, and we met because I was working at a company, and I hired his, company that he had just had for a year or two to redesign our website. And then that's how we kind of became friends.
Oh, cool.
That's
really cool.
Yeah. And then from there it was just like, instant friends. And then we both got certified in this Donald Miller story brand marketing strategy. And so we both went to Nashville together, and like we really like connected there, and then we started doing these like yearly business retreats where we would like get together and challenge each other and brainstorm ideas and things. And that's really what this podcast, it came out of that. And here we are 5 years later, doing the show, and
that's really
it's been great. But yeah, it's really important to have other business people in your life who have in a similar space, because it can be really lonely, I think, as an entrepreneur. And you feel isolated. And I say this a lot on the show because it's a common thing where it's like, you might have friends that have jobs and all that stuff, but they don't understand the difficulties of running a business and running payroll and laying somebody off or having difficult conversations. There's like a lot of complexities in it that are different from just clocking in and clocking out. And so to have somebody that you can really talk with. I remember the first time I hired my first employee, I was like really torn up about it. I was like, trying to do the math and talking with Ben, like, all this stuff. And then same thing when I had to fire that person. It was like, So, but it was like priceless to have that kind of relationship. So I think it's important that people go out there and try to find like-minded people in a similar business space that they can bounce ideas off and communicate. So that's cool that you're still friends with that guy, and that you guys can.
It's incredibly important. I have often said that being a business owner is the loneliest thing I've ever done. It's so isolating. You don't have anybody that's like on the same wavelength that's like you can talk to other business owners, and that's helpful.
Yeah.
Absolutely helpful. But it's the buck stops with you. Like there's no way to defer responsibility anymore.
Yeah.
And a lot of time when you're working for someone else, it's always like the boss's problem ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Now you're the boss.
Yeah.
Now it's your problem. Everything's your problem.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge advocate for business consultants, business coaches. So if you're starting a business or have a business and you don't work with a coach, maybe look into it, because they can be very helpful if you find one with a good personality.
Yeah.
The guy I've been working with, I view him like a partner. He's not an actual partner, so I don't have the financial obligation of a partner. But we have a similar faith background, and we can bounce ideas off each other, and he can guide me, and it's really cool.
Yeah. So how soon did you like kind of start thinking like, oh crap, I need to really take this seriously, like, and start thinking about the future? I mean, did you kind of go into any type of planning mode after that first year?
Yeah.
Did you start to think like, oh, I really need to, excuse me, I need to think about hiring somebody, or like at what point were you thinking like, okay, I'm not passionate about being a technician, so if I'm going to work myself out of all this doing, I need to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, passion's a funny word. We can talk about that later. I had a goal after the first year. It felt like, okay, this is something I can build. I didn't think of it as something I could build till I left my job at the church and was like, okay, well, this is it now. And so it was that. So 2018 is when I left the position at the church, and 2019 is when I hired my first guy. Okay. And that's when really you start thinking about things a little bit more.
Yeah, like, oh, maybe I should have an employee handbook, and like,
creating processes,
like onboarding. Yeah, exactly.
Because when you're doing it yourself, the process. It's all up here.
Uh-huh.
And so that's when you really start, and it's still tough because when it was just me, I was on the field. I hired a guy that had no experience, so I was on the field with him, training him every day. I'm still answering the phones, scheduling appointments. Like there's you run out of time pretty quick when you're doing all the hats. And so then, you kind of start growing, and then you reevaluate. I'm reevaluating my processes right now, because employees is one of the hardest things about running a business, and you don't realize it until you're in the thick of it.
Right. Yeah. So, one of the things I really like is like your brand, your website, your logo. It's kind of fun, you know. How far were you into the process before you thought about really kind of putting some bones around the brand? And did you sit down and come up with like a mission, vision statement and do all that kind of stuff?
So the logo I lucked into. My brother did one of those competition websites for his company, and he really liked the guy he was working with. And I was like, hey, because my brother started his company shortly before I started mine. So
what does your brother do?
Why'd you have to ask me that?
He also has a garage door company.
Well, yeah, no, he's a competitor. No, he's in the finance management space.
Okay.
I guess he works with implementing financial practices like a ERP and developing software and stuff like that around that. It's way beyond what my capabilities are.
Yeah.
And he even has trouble describing what he does. So to people that they can understand it.
Yeah. No offense,
if
bro.
they're in his space, they understand exactly what he does. If they're outside of his space, it's like, okay, what is that thing?
So ERS.
It's like QuickBooks on steroids.
Okay.
Once companies have outgrown QuickBooks, they're ready for a different financial implementation software. Anyway, so I asked him if his guy would be willing to work up something for me, and he did for $300.
Oh, wow, nice.
Yeah. Cheap logo.
It's like the story of Nike.
Right? Yeah, there you go. So, and then like we kind of talked about it, but he's the one that came up with the idea of putting a garage door in the logo. So it's, it's got my initials in it, the C, G, and D in the shape of like a garage door.
Yeah.
But it's multi-layered too, because some people think it looks like a spring, which is obviously
also,
industry related.
Yeah.
And then it's simple, like it has my names, and my name is very clear on what I do. So like I felt like the brand made sense. It's like you just look at it, you see Chris's garage doors, you see a fun little symbol, but then you look at it deeper, you're like, oh, that's a garage door. So it's
like a hieroglyph.
Yeah. It's right. So then I started like I built put a truck wrap on my first truck and started thinking about the brand. So the vision and mission came about probably in 2019, 2020, somewhere around there, when I really started to look at growth and building and creating like community impact. So it's making Colorado a better place to live by doing the best possible work, treating people as our most valuable asset, and giving generously to our community. And then I started to hey, well, I've got branded logos on all of my shirts and hats and stuff, and I feel like a lot of it's just for comfort. Like when you hire a company and they show up in a branded truck with a branded shirt, like
you just feel more at ease. Like I hate when the guy come, even when Amazon, when they come in like some like Honda Civic and like some guys coming out there vaping, and you're like, are you with Amazon or I'm confused?
Yeah. But then you just expand from there. And I've really started to work, like I have an animated logo, which I think is fun. Mm-hmm. I created a mascot. It's Chris the Lion. Okay. So we can show that off later. And started working at making my website a little bit more accessible, present.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that I've always felt like brand represents professionalism. Mm-hmm. And if you put effort into how you are perceived and how people see you, then it shows that you care about the reputation of your company, the work you're putting out, the way that people interact with you. So it's been an important aspect of my company since the beginning, and it's just kind of grown and evolved throughout the process.
And then when you were coming up with your kind of your vision or your mission statement, what, like how did those three things, was it just something a part of your life that you'd kind of always encompass, and then you're just like, oh, I'm gonna make this part of the business too?
Part of it's I never want to start a business. We talked about that, but I'm also not super money motivated. I like having the money to cover my expenses. Obviously, who doesn't? And I like being able to just be able to buy a couple things that are a little above and beyond. But I grew up lower middle class. I never had want for food. And we always had a shelter, but I never had like a lot of extra. So my goal, even, because I went to seminary, it's not like I was expecting to make a lot of money. My goal or my desires was just to be debt free and own a house. Like that was kind of like my baseline. If I could just do that, I'll be satisfied in life. And so I started to realize as my company was having success that I could make a decent living, better than I ever actually expected me to, especially in the ministry world. And I don't believe it's right to just keep it. I don't believe it's right to build something that doesn't impact the community. It's part of, my whole. I believe that everyone has a purpose. And that our underlying purpose is to bring positive impact to our community, to our sphere of influence, and we're all positioned in a unique way to do that. And I got positioned to start a company and to make money building a company. And so I feel like it's important for me to use the success of my company to make a positive impact on the community I'm in.
Yeah. That's great. And I think if everyone thought like that, right, we would have a peaceful world.
Right.
Everyone would get along and there'd be no need, and no one would lack for anything. Yeah. So I think that's cool. How has it been as far as, when you started hiring, because you have, I think, such a strong culture, if you will, like how has that been as far as, because sometimes, right, I need a warm body who can like show up someplace and do an estimate or do this install or whatever. How are you trying to guide that process as far as making sure you bring in the right people that have the right mindset and the right culture and things like that?
That is actually one of the toughest problems that I've dealt with. Like I said, employees, when you hire people, and it's interesting. There's a transition because you can be a good person, and I guess the jury's out on if I'm a good person. But let's just
we'll find out in the end.
Let's just assume for now that I'm a good person. Let's just assume,
right?
For the purpose of this conversation. But just because you're a good person or you have a good vision doesn't mean you're a good manager or leader in that sense. Or leader in a work environment sense. So I've actually struggled a lot with this concept or with this process of like making sure I'm getting the right people, the right seats, and the right people, and developing them and helping them to understand the company's culture, character, vision, all of that stuff. And so part of it's it's hard to vet someone. People can interview really well and then be bad employees. People can interview poorly, be great employees. People go through life and life gets in the way and life makes them unreliable, or however it all works. Because I've had good people that have gone through a lot of life problems, and it really impacts their value to the company, and so it's like you have to come at it from a employer hat, sometimes, and that's tough for me because I care so much about the people that I'm invested in, and so like you said, firing someone, it's very tough. It's one of the toughest things you'll do.
It's like, it's not personal, it's business.
Right? But it is personal in the sense of like you don't want to do it. Like even if they're the worst employee, and I've had some pretty toxic people in my company, and I still don't want to fire them because deep down I feel like I can
make them better. I can help them. I can guide them.
I know like
just
God,
need them one more chance.
I know that the gospel's for everybody.
Yeah.
And if God put them in my life, I feel like there's a responsibility to be that light for them. But there is a
or
moment.
God put them in your life so that you could grow as a leader to learn how to fire people better.
That's it too. Yes. There's always a line where you have to cut ties. It makes it unhealthy for the organization, unhealthy for you completely. So that's been tough. So one of the things I've started to implement is bi-weekly team meetings, and we have a practice so that we start the meeting with a personal check-in, like, hey, scale 1 to 10, how you feeling right now? And then we do a core value discussion. So we have 5 core values, and I ask them, what's one way that you've lived out one of the core values in your life in the last 2 weeks, and what's one way that someone has lived out that core value to you in your life in the last 2 weeks? And it just kind of helps us think about the purpose of the company, the mission, the vision, and living out those values in our lives. And then we'll do a check-in with other stuff and training. And then the interview and hiring process it's tough to master for anybody.
It is,
really.
Like you said, it's like the phase 1 is, they look good on paper. Like, okay, like I read their stuff, I think they're qualified, like this sounds good. And then it's that in-person part, and I think that's where I've always I feel like I have a pretty good intuition about people, and so a lot of times I'll be like, oh yeah, like I felt really good about this person, whatever. And then they get in, and then you start seeing some of their work habits and behaviors. And again, I think there's an element of where I've had to grow a lot again as a leader, right? Where it's like, okay, I don't like this certain behavior. Instead of me just being like, oh, they should know, or whatever. Like I need to be more communicative and set better expectations, and when I see something starting to show up, be like, hey, we and so I think there's areas where as a leader, I need to grow in order to maybe where I've had an employee who's could have been a good fit, but because of my lack of leadership, I let things go too far, and then it's been like, all right, now the relationships, we can't salvage it at this point, now I have to let you go, but
important lessons to learn. Absolutely,
totally.
Expectations of communication, it's like any relationship. The more the expectations are laid out, the better you'll be able to manage. And it's something I've learned too. It's just because you tell someone something doesn't mean it sinks in. So having it in writing so we can defer back to it. Like, hey, this is what the SOP says. It's clearly written here. We've talked about it. I need you to start implementing this practice in how you interact with customers, or how you inspect a door, or how you treat office staff or employee or coworker. Like as long as it's all written down, then you can confirm, yes, we did talk about this. Because I've had a lot of conversations, and then the employee will do something opposite, but I didn't document like how we explained it. So it's like, well, he could claim we didn't talk about it, or she. What,
as far as I'm assuming you're a Christian in a company. You're not a Christian company.
Yes.
Right? Would that be accurate?
Yes.
So you're a Christian in a company. And so then as far as the hiring, and especially this is one thing that, we're a small team here at Brand Viva. And so there is an element of like, when you're looking for people, you kind of like, I don't want to, I want people who are kind of aligned in the same way. And I think as you grow, it's obviously a lot harder and things like that, unless you are a Christian company or, a nonprofit that is a Christian nonprofit. And then most people who are going to come work for you are probably going to be Christians, whatever. So how do you handle that as far as, because again, right, if you say, hey, we don't want cussing or, like lewd behavior or whatever, like on these job sites, does that weed out people? Do you lead with that at all? I mean, obviously there's some laws and compliances and things like that, right? That it's like, all right, I can't discriminate against somebody. Because...
Right. I've been very intentional to not associate my faith with my company from a public perspective. Like this is a private interview. Obviously it's going to be posted. I'm going to share it with my company's like stuff, but it's more like owner's perspective, not company perspective in that sense. Because I feel like it's manipulative. It can be manipulative if you are advertising as a Christian company. Because when you're trying
like
to
Christian Brothers.
Yeah.
I've heard some stories.
We're not trying to defame any companies in this podcast.
But some people are like, I think that's one of the difficult things. They have the fish on their like business card or whatever, and then they act so unchristianly, and you're like, wow, like you went out of your way to like put this on your stuff, and then now you're not even a good representation of that.
Yes, it's an abuse of trust.
Yeah.
If you're just putting Christian on the name so that you can draw people who have faith because they're like, oh, well, you're a Christian company.
Right.
I'd rather just be known as a company with a great reputation and then, oh, they're Christian. Because then it's like pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Maybe I should think about this Jesus thing as opposed to, oh, well, they're Christian. So every little thing you do is under a microscope because there's people that are hostile towards faith and they want to make, and they're like, oh, see, these people claim they be Christians, but they act like
hypocrites.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have the company be a light to the community, and then people find out, oh, hey, the owner's a Christian. He actually acts out of faith, and maybe that's why his company is the way it is. And because there's no way you can do everything perfectly. I have negative reviews. There are mistakes that we make, and there's interactions that just don't go well, and that's not 100% preventable. I mean, we still have a 4.9 rating on Google, so
hey.
We're
humble
so
brag,
right? Yeah. So even the negative that doesn't outweigh the positive in that sense. But as far as the hiring process, I don't bring up faith at all.
Yeah.
I bring up, so I more talk about the company and what the company's vision is and what we do for society and the kind of people. And so I'm looking for qualities of like professionalism. Yeah. Because you're not gonna cuss and swear at people if you're professional, right?
Right.
Like I personally don't have a huge problem with swearing.
Yeah.
I've been known to do it. But it's the context of when and how and where, right? Like if I'm in front of a customer cussing in front of them, that's not professional.
Right.
If I'm cussing at them, that's extremely unprofessional.
Right.
Like how they dress, how they communicate. I really, for a technician standpoint, I need to know that they have a mechanical ability.
Yeah.
Because like, I don't care if you don't know anything about garage doors when you come work for me. I'll train you, but I need to know that you're capable of doing a mechanical thing.
Yeah. It's like it's those things where you can teach. There's certain things like that's how I always look at it is like, and there's a saying, right? You hire for attitude, not aptitude.
Yes.
Because if someone has the right attitude, you can teach them the aptitude, right? You can say, oh, like anybody can install a garage door. Like open this manual, look at this stuff, like But
you'd be surprised.
Well, that's why we have you.
No. I mean, like I think anybody could technically buy a garage door and install it. I had a guy, my first attempt at an employee, I think he had some form of disability or something. He couldn't comprehend he wasn't spatially aware. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
Well, like, for example, this is when I realized he wasn't going to be a good fit. We're installing a garage door opener that has a battery backup. The battery backup it's rectangular in shape, right? It's a little elongated, so it's not a perfect square. It's a cube, but it's like elongated, so it's a rectangular cube, whatever the word for that is. And so there's only two.
Tesseract.
There's really yes, it was glowing blue too. There's only two ways that it could actually fit in the machine. It's long way this way, or you flip it around long way this way. There's only one right way to do it because you want the contacts to be out so you can plug the wires in.
Right.
But I handed it to him, like he's on the ladder. And I handed it to him the way it's supposed to go, and he grabs it, and then he turns it like a dog with a stick trying to get in a door. He does this, like it just pauses and stops, and then he kind of looks at it again and does the same thing. And I'm like, like nice kid. I really liked him, and I wanted him to work out. But I knew in that moment, he's physically incapable of accomplishing this
and
job.
then I can't trust him if he's on his own.
Right.
How long is this job going to take? What's going to be wrong?
Yeah. It was so bizarre to me. So yes, anybody could install a garage door, but
a guy who
there are some people that are mentally or physically incapable of accomplishing that, and it's bizarre to me. But it is what it is.
How long have you obviously, there's probably jobs where you have to jump in and do things from time to time. At what point did you start trying to work yourself out of the business?
I started when I hired my first employee, trying to get out. So once he was fully trained, I would kind of give him all the lion's share of the work, and then I would cover the extras that come in.
Yeah.
And then when I hired my second guy, I would give them both the lion's share of the work. And then it was basically at that point where I was primarily off the field.
Yeah.
And I would only step in on like absolute emergency type situations.
Yeah.
And I've been very intentional because I'll even be booked out for weeks at a time and not go on the field because I'm trying to, one, make sure my employees have enough work to pay their bills.
Yeah. And
two, make a clear distinction that my role in the company is not field work.
Right.
I am designed to, my goal is to now grow the company.
Yeah.
Build the back end stuff, and then I was still doing administrative stuff, and then I hired my first admin in 2022.
Okay.
And that's when I started offloading the day-to-day operations side of the business too. And
nice.
I get drawn back in depending on context, situation, size of the job, but majority of the time since 2021, I've been almost 100% off the field.
Nice. And so now, what is your main focus?
So I still do estimates. That's the one thing that connects me to my customers. Is
if
someone says, "Hey, I want a new garage door," majority of the time it's going to be me on site, not 100%.
And you're a friendly face. You drive up. You get to drive around, beautiful Colorado and meet people and listen to podcasts on your journey and stuff like that.
It's true. So, it's fun to drive around and have that experience.
Yeah. So you're kind of like right now you're kind of the head of business development and sales.
Yeah, you could say that, business development and then overall operations.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's my main role, and I still do a lot of the back end day-to-day stuff that's outside of answering the phones and scheduling.
Yeah.
So payroll and I have an accountant, bookkeeper, but working with them, numbers and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Fun times.
You're living the dream.
The dream of making sure that I have enough money coming in to pay my employees
and yourself
and myself.
Yeah. So with that, what is your typical lead source? You said the first thing that you did that was really beneficial was just getting into networking groups, meeting people, raising awareness about what you do.
Yeah.
And that, because again, I think people, you hear this all the time, right? They do business with people they know, like, and trust.
Absolutely.
And so the more reps that you can put in for people to get to know you, like you, and trust you, they're going to start referring business to you and hiring you and all those other kind of things. So that was kind of like the first phase, right, of business development is getting out there. What have you seen? Have you done any digital advertising, or have you moved into any of that type of work at all?
I've tinkered with a little bit here and there. Primarily, it's been networking. So I just meet people. There's a guy. So it's the phrase. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
A person that I network with takes it a step further and says it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And so it's more about like how present you are in people's mind. If you're top of mind, if they know you.
Yeah, I always say top of mind is first in line when it comes to business.
It's true. Yeah. It's very true. If you are the first person they think of, or if they think about you even when they don't need you,
right,
they're gonna have like, oh, I know this garage door guy, and that person's garage door is kind of wonky.
I know, and that's what I'm always like, man, it's really important to stay top of mind because I remember earlier on too, there'd be so many times where someone wouldn't hire me, and it was like, I'd be like, hey, like, I do like headshots and photos and stuff, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. Yeah, dang it, I hired somebody else. So sorry. Right? It's like, okay. But that's on me, right? Because I'm not the person who's top of mind, and and again, I think being top of mind and then being able to articulate what you do, right? Yeah. Like so many times it's like, well, what do you do? It's like, well, I try to be the jack of all trades, and then it's like no one can really think of like, I know what you do. And so, even for us at Brand Viva, we're a full service agency, but I really just focus on video content and podcasting.
Absolutely.
Right. And just doing that, I'd say over the past 3 years, I've really just said, this is what we do. We do video content and we do podcasting. Mm-hmm. And there's a handful of people out there that they just think of like podcasting, and it's like I'm the first person that they refer, because it's like I'm top of their mind when it comes to podcasting stuff.
Yeah, and you got a great space for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Specific is terrific. The more honed in you can be on what you're asking for.
There's riches in the niches.
Yeah. I love that. So basically, as far as advertising goes, I don't do much more than networking. I've tried radio here and there. I did a little bit of local TV, but
you didn't see a bump in.
So radio, these kind of things, it's if you have the money to invest, you're going to become, sorry.
That's right.
It's a very loose ring. If you have the money to invest, you're going to be able to do long-term. A lot of times it's brand awareness is what these campaigns are. It's like the top of mind thing. If you have enough money to spend, eventually pay off. The radio I did, it broke even. And I would have considered keeping it up. They changed account reps for me, and I just didn't they weren't listening to what I wanted, and I just was like, forget it.
Yeah.
But it ended up being a wash. And then I've done things like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it because I'm not with them anymore, but Team Dave Logan.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not allowed to use their branding anymore, but I was at one point with
kind of like a paid, Tom Martino, whoever it is out there in the local industry, spheres that, they mention you on the shows, kind of stuff.
So I did that kind of stuff. So when I'm ready to scale, because one of the problems is with the employee issue, like I'm actually at capacity right now. I'm not trying to bring in a ton of new revenue.
And if you grow too fast, right, then it's like your service starts to tank, your Google stars start going down, and now you can't handle. So it's important to kind of grow the team to a place where it's like, okay, now I need to turn a funnel on of getting more leads and, all that.
Exactly. So. And as a small business, a lot of times the networking is a great way to build it because a lot of multi-million-dollar organizations they're not doing small-level networking, like local networking. They're doing the brand awareness stuff and lead generation on a higher scale because it's part of their marketing budget. Right. So when I get to that point, I don't think I'll ever abandon local networking because it's just so valuable. Yeah. But if I'm ready to scale, that kind of stuff it seems to be a good choice for brand awareness and top of mind.
Yeah. Nice. Well, listen, this has been a great conversation. I felt like, oh man, it's already time for us to wrap up here. We keep chatting. Well, we always like to leave people with kind of an action item, you know. So starting Monday, what would you encourage someone who's out there maybe thinking about starting a business or, thinking about, growing or whatever that might be? What would be the one word of advice that you would say, hey, you know what? This has been really beneficial for me. I would focus on this thing, starting Monday morning. What would that be, you think?
So understand who you are and what your purpose is kind of where I land. Because a lot of people want to focus on passion or happiness or what they want to do. It kind of become a very selfish thing. I think if you lead with understanding how you're uniquely gifted to make a positive impact on your community, if you start with that, knowing who you are, and that can guide everything you do from that point. Yeah.
Any good resources as far as that comes, or like if someone's trying to figure that out or discover that, do you have a certain place that you would point them to say, hey, like this is a really good book, or this is a really good, way to figure out that,
That's a great question. I would say have them call me. I'm actually
all right.
I'm in the process of writing a book about that.
Okay, perfect.
And
awesome.
I can't think of any resources.
Okay, but maybe shoot you an email or
shoot me an email.
What's a good place to, if people wanted to, connect with you or hire you to fix their garage or install a garage door, where are people getting in contact with you, and how can they find you?
To connect with me directly, email's the best because I always look at my emails, my work emails. It's chris@chrisgaragedoors.com. So website, chrisgaragedoors.com. Phone number to call, schedule appointment, 720-277-8451.
Okay.
If you go to my website, there's an intake form. We can reach out to you. You can also text the number I gave you. Email to schedule an appointment, office@chrisgaragedoors.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Chris Tyrell. You can or my company's on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. So we're out there. Like I said, brand is important, so we're kind of out there.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk to me about discovering your purpose, please send me an email, chris@chrisgaragedoors.com. I'll happy to talk to you about it and the process of the book I'm writing.
All right. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for joining us on The Friday Habit. If you go to thefridayhabit.com, you can find show notes for this episode and ways to get in touch. At the bottom of the page, you can download our Friday Habit System guide that will show you how to spend more time working on your business instead of always in your business. And until next time, remember, live every day like it's Friday.